Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Investing for Impact in Practice, How to Build Successful Investment Strategies, which will give us the opportunity to present the new EVPA Investing for Impact Toolkit. My name is Gianluca Gaggiotti, and I'm a Research Associate at EVPA. I will be moderating this webinar today together with my colleague Arnau Picon Martinez, EVPA's Research Analyst. Arnau co-authored the Investors for Impact Toolkit together with Alessia Gianoncelli, the head of Knowledge Center of EVPA, who is now on maternity leave. Before we dive into the topic of today's webinar, I know you are all well aware of online platforms and their functioning, but I would like to pinpoint a few housekeeping rules. Throughout the session, you will be able to open and hide your control panel, which is the console that appears on the right-hand side of your screen. During the webinar, we will have 2 Q&A sessions, during which our panelists will answer your inquiries. So if you do have a question, don't hesitate to write it down in the relative section of the control panel at any moment during the webinar. Please don't forget to include and mention to whom you would like to address the question to. As we are many online today, I will keep all the participants muted, and this session is being recorded, and the recording will be available on EVPA website in the coming days. Finally, if you have any technical issues accessing the webinar, please do not hesitate to contact my colleague Ludovica Piergiovanni at the email that you see on the slide. Without further ado, I'm very happy today to introduce you to our experienced practitioners that we have online. It's a pleasure to have with us Elena Casolari, Managing Director of Opus Impact Fund, an impact investment vehicle that provides financial resources and management support to early-stage social enterprises whose businesses serve low-income people and disadvantaged communities. For 10 years, Elena was CEO at ACRA, an international NGO, and before that spent 12 years in the investment banking industry covering emerging markets. Then I'm glad to introduce you to Gergely Ivancic, that from now on I will call George for sake of simplicity, who is Senior Investment Manager at Impact Ventures, Hungary's first social impact fund launched back in 2018. From deal sourcing to portfolio management, George is responsible for the investment process and impact management of the fund. George builds on his experience as investment analyst at PBG Venture Capital and as M&A analyst at VNS I4I Invest. Before diving into the content, I would like to show you the structure of the webinar of today. So first of all, my colleague Arnau will provide with you an introduction of the Investing for Impact Toolkit, guiding you through its structure and how you can navigate it. After that, I will introduce briefly the main elements of the investment strategy, and then I will leave the floor to our 2 speakers that will explain in details how their fund strategy works in practice, making links with the 3 core practices of venture philanthropy. After that, we will have the first Q&A session where the speakers will address the question that you've been posting on the chat. And after this first Q&A, we will move to the second part when we will talk about the investment process. So again, after a brief introduction of Arnau, we will leave the floor to our speakers who will bring in their experience in managing an investment process in real life. And then we will have the second and last Q&A session. And after that, I will draw some concluding remarks. Before moving on, I just suggest you again to write down your question in the panel while the speakers are speaking. So do not wait till the end, but write them down as the speakers are presenting. Without further ado, I would leave now the floor to my colleague Arnau, who will present you the new Investing for Impact Toolkit.
Thank you very much, Gianluca. And yes, thank you for this introduction. Hello, everybody. I am very happy to be introducing today the Investing for Impact Toolkit. This toolkit, as we can show in our next slide, is a guide. So it's a publication that guides newcomers and also early stage investors for impact, and provides an insight into what works in the impact ecosystem. So it contains best strategies and practices for adopting the venture philanthropy approach in practice. This toolkit is not only a guide for newcomers, but also a compilation of EVPA's research and resources that have been conducted by the Knowledge Center over the years. And among these research, we could highlight some publications. For example, we are including the EVPA Charter of Investors for Impact, which is a document that we launched last year in our conference in The Hague. And we also developed a webinar explaining how the principles of this charter apply in practice. These principles define the DNA of Investors for Impact, and also their uniqueness in the market. Along with the charter, we are also displaying the frameworks of the 3 venture philanthropy practices, which are tailored financing, non-financial support, and impact measurement and management, and also the framework for implementing an exit strategy. There are different ways to read this toolkit. So it's a publication that, of course, you can read normally from the beginning to the end. But it is also possible, for example, to check in case you would like to know more about one specific venture philanthropy practice, or for one stage of the investment process, for example, or for one principle of the charter. The design of the toolkit with a navigation bar, with the hyperlinks that allow you to jump back and forth, really allow you to have a reading that will be non-linear, but more like checking concrete things that might be useful for everyone. So to summarize this, the essence is that each chapter of the toolkit makes sense by itself to be consulted or checked. In our next slide, we are showcasing the journey, which is the 4 different parts that the toolkit includes. We start by setting up an organization investing for impact. So this first part includes how to define the funding model, fundraising, recruiting a CEO and a management team, working out the role of the board, and abiding by high ethical standards. In the second part, we have the 8 components of the investment strategy, to which we will dive in further in this webinar. Then we have the different parts of the investment process, and finally we have the exit. As you can see in this slide, below the titles, you can see this reference to, for example, IMM Step 1, TF Step 1. This refers to each step of each framework that I was mentioning before, that is displayed throughout the journey, as well as these numbers that you see next to the different titles. These numbers refer to the principles of the Charter of Investors for Impact, and they are also displayed throughout the journey. Before diving into the content of the webinar of today, allow me to do a short summary of the charter and also of the frameworks of tailored financing, non-financial support, impact measurement and management, and exit. So we can start with the charter. As I mentioned, this is a set of principles that we published 1 year ago, and these principles define the uniqueness and the DNA of the Investors for Impact. And the reasoning behind mapping the principles that we have done this exercise throughout the toolkit is to help investors for impact better embed the charter in their activities and in their strategies. And as you can see, mostly the principles were displayed throughout the investment strategy. So this is a key moment in which you can really have a look at the charter and engage discussions on how do you relate to it. This charter has been signed by more than 300 practitioners, and we will share the webpage with you later today to sign the charter if you feel reflected by these principles and you want to endorse the charter. Now we can see the venture philanthropy practices and the framework that I was referring to. So we can start by tailored financing. As you can see, this framework has 3 steps. First, investors for impact assess their preconditions, and they do that during the investment strategy. And then during the investment process, they assess the financial needs of the SPO, and they match their own goals with the SPO's needs. The next venture philanthropy practice is non-financial support. Again, as for tailored financing, during the investment strategy, investors for impact assess their own assets, and during the investment process, they will assess the needs of the SPO. Then they will develop the NFS plan, and they will deliver, of course, non-financial support during the investment management. And finally, after the investment process, so during the exit, they will assess the value and impact of the non-financial support. And the 3 practice is impact measurement and management. This will take place during the investment management, so during the investment process, of course. But already during the investment strategy, investors for impact set up their own objectives, and then during the investment process, they go through all the framework. We have also, besides the 3 venture philanthropy practices, this other framework that is the one of exit. And again, as part of the investment strategy, investors for impact determine the key exit considerations that will drive future decisions. And then during the investment process, they develop the exit plan and they determine exit readiness. After the investment process, they will execute the exit, of course, and then after exit, follow up with former investees. I mentioned, today we are focusing more in the investment strategy and the investment process. So the second and the third part of the toolkit. So we will go a bit less depth for the exit, but so we can start with the investment strategy. So after this introduction, we can move to the next part. And I'm leaving the floor to Gianluca again, who will present what are the main components of the investment strategy.
Thank you very much, Arnau, for this introduction and for these useful insights on the toolkit and how it can be navigated, which I think is very important. So, as you mentioned, I will quickly introduce the audience to the concept of investment strategy, but I'm sure many of the attendees are already aware of the concept. So the investment strategies is made of 8 main elements that you can see displayed in this checklist. I won't go in depth into all of them, but for example, the definition of the geographical focus, the definition of the types of social purpose organizations to support, the definition of how to collaborate with other actors are some of the elements covered during this phase, which, as you can see from the graph on the right, comes before the investment process. As Arnau already mentioned, during this phase, the first steps of the EVPA frameworks are addressed. So it is really the time when investors assess the set of financial support and non-financial support that they can provide to the investees. But it's also when they start setting the objectives of their impact investing strategy and of their impact measurement and management framework. And as I now already mentioned, it's also very important that the exit strategy is well aligned with the investment strategy. So during this phase, it's very important that investors start determining their key exit considerations that may depend on a variety of elements, such as the context of the investment, the type of funding, and the type of investees supported. So it's now the time to leave the floor to one of our experienced practitioners that we have today on the call. So I will now leave the floor to George, who will tell us a bit more about the investment strategy of Impact Ventures.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Sorry, I don't have a working webcam, but I hope you all can hear me well. It's hard to live up to this super structured and refined best practice framework that was just introduced, but I'll aim to share where our focus lies and what challenges we face as newcomers to this industry. So to start with, let me tell you briefly about the context of this first institutional impact investment fund in the CE region. So take Hungary. This is a small Central Eastern European region country with very little history in social entrepreneurship or venture philanthropy. Even the traditional VC industry is in a very nascent phase, only with like a decade of significant track record. The main social challenges that we identified were related to poverty and access to like essential services such as education and healthcare. So although the social sector is quite vibrant, it is very heavily dependent on government subsidies, and they kind of have a prejudice towards the words of startup and investments. And although there were a couple of pioneers like Nest who were doing the heavy lifting in educating the market, there were of course huge gaps, funding gaps for the social purpose organizations. And in this context, a team of ambitious entrepreneurs and investing professionals came together, and we started Impact Ventures Hungary back in 2018. And our main goal was really to support the development of this very fragile, very early ecosystem that was really missing this tailored financing we were set out to do. And also, we really wanted to bring the consciousness of impact measurement to surface. And at the end of the day, our main goal was to bring strong cases for impact investment and bring success stories so that even more practitioners can join along the way. So as a fact sheet, you see a lot of information about us. I just want to highlight that we are still a very, very small fund with 2 vehicles managing 21 million euros assets under management. And we focus on the early stage, as I mentioned, so seed and Series A funding. From a financial instrument perspective, I'll have a chance to talk a bit more, but we do equity and quasi-equity investments in the range of 100K to 2.5 million. And we have a focus on follow-on investments since we really want to stay with the social enterprises we invest in for more than 7 years. So it's very important to have some money and support left for later stage fundings. We have this ambitious target to invest in 15 to 25 deals. That is all together through the 2 vehicles we have. And we have 6 investments so far in the portfolio, but hopefully there will be 4 to 5 more by the end of the year. And as I mentioned, we have a strong focus on Hungary. So we have to invest like 50% of our money in Hungarian social enterprises, which is very important for us. And I think we'll be able to overachieve this, not just because we are Hungarian practitioners, but because we think there's a huge opportunity in this market and it's really well evolving. But on the other hand, we have a geographical focus as wide as investing throughout the European Union. And that is mainly because I think social innovation doesn't really have borders. And if we set out to invest in the best practices, then that often might be across the border. And that's why we have the opportunity to invest both east and west of our country, and presumably we have a focus on the Central Eastern European region, because that's where we have the most partners and field partners and co-investors. And if we're talking about co-investors, we usually work with local field partners who don't necessarily have to be impact investors, because I think we can learn a lot, and we can also let's say incentivize traditional market players to get involved in impact investing if we also participate, but that's another story. We are sector agnostic, which means we can really invest in any kind of social enterprise. But as I mentioned, our main focus areas are around employment and education and health. What we see that there are lots of underserved groups. There are significant amount of low socioeconomic status populations, and we see they struggle to get access to some very important reskilling and upskilling, and we find that extremely important to find the best social enterprises who can support them in that area. When talking about employment, of course, income generation and the help of getting income and becoming independent is highly important. But also we have this topic of providing access and kind of opening up the workplace for people who were more excluded from the labor market. Let it be mothers with small children or people with different kind of disabilities. Yeah, in terms of health tech, I think we have an interesting focus on different kind of disabilities, and we have a focus on prevention, because I think technology doesn't only have a huge supporting role in improving well-being and life standards, but also in prevention. And then there's clean tech, reducing emissions and kind of relieving the stress on the planet. So that's an overview of our focus areas. And if we move forward, yes, exactly. Allow me to share a little bit about our tailored financing approach. I think this is very tricky, but I kind of show you here what are the kind of financial instruments we use, and that cover from equity to mezzanine. We are more on the equity side of the spectrum. We always have an equity link in our investments, and that is mainly to do with the fact that we invest in tech-enabled social innovation. And in these instances, we look at very scalable business models, which become profitable in the long run and kind of request and require equity investments. But on the other hand, we see convertible debt as a very important and a very much sought after financial instrument in the social investment space, because of the lack of opportunity to really have a price tag on the company at the moment, or just being able to bridge the time being until they become profitable or manage to think through their business model. And we have quite some instance of mezzanine financing that is for more mature or less scalable solutions, which work very well and have a huge role in providing access not just to funding but to the services that the social enterprise is doing. Yes, we follow a lockstep model, which means that the impact and financial returns are interlocked, and we see that one unit of financial profit generation should come hand in hand with a unit of impact return. And therefore, we cannot really do trade-off mechanisms. That means we cannot provide like impact incentives, decreasing interest rates subject to the amount of impact achieved, because it goes against the idea of a highly correlating impact and financial success. And doing these decisions are extremely tricky. So we eliminate them by finding business models where these go really hand in hand. The way that we can ensure that the impact has a very strong focus is that not the SPO, but the fund manager is incentivized for impact. So the entirety of the fund manager's carry is actually linked to impact performance, and that means if we are not able to deliver the level of impact that was planned, then there's no financial participation in the success of the fund, which is a very strong commitment. And on non-financial support, I think we're very much only figuring this out, because it's a very difficult topic. We have, of course, very straightforward strategic support, business development support for our companies, but in many cases it's hard to quantify or put a price tag on what kind of non-financial support we provide. The main one is, of course, impact measurement, and since we have an in-house lawyer, she's providing huge support for our portfolio companies. Assessing the needs, I'm afraid that in many cases we cannot really help in each and every way our portfolio companies wish us to help, but we're doing our best and kind of gathering advisors to help in that. And finally, on my last slide in this this area, Gianluca, if you can help me switch to the next slide. Yes, a little bit about impact. I already told you about what our long-term objectives are relating to education and employment and health and responsible consumption. What we do on an investment strategic level, that we link these to SDG objectives, and not just the high-level ones, but the deeper level ones, like 4.3, providing equal access to technical and vocational training. So we really try to go more in depth to find links and connections to a more understandable and widely understood kind of system of impact. Yes, in terms of resources, I just wanted to share that our investment managers are doing the heavy lifting in terms of setting up the measurement and management process. They are the ones who train the founders and the social enterprise if they need some help in this area. We developed in-house impact thesis guides and an in-house risk assessment model so that we can use that in setting up the process. We aim to link to IRIS metrics, because those are very well benchmarkable and we can set performance targets. And also we often use the B Corp assessment as a means of finding the low-hanging fruit in terms of short-term, quick impact improvements. So we do 100-day plans, and in those 100 days we can address areas that the B Corp assessment showed that were a bit weak, and from then on we can work on that. In terms of impact risk assessment, that's my final thought here. We were inspired by Bridges Ventures, and they have all the credit in this little diagram on the right corner. They did the impact radar, and it really inspired us to go more in depth and think through what the impact risk is with our investments. And currently we're working on a proprietary model where we can identify and mitigate and kind of manage the risks associated with impact, and that really helps us in later stage portfolio management to improve our impact measurement and delivering impact to our beneficiaries. So in a nutshell, that's our investment strategy, and I'll pass the word back to Gianluca.
Thank you very much, George, for this very insightful presentation. We have already received some questions, but I encourage the audience to ask any question to you linked to this presentation. I will now leave the floor to Elena who will present the investment strategy of OPES Impact Fund.
Hello, thanks Gianluca, very nice being here, and so thanks for the invitation. I really love to share with you our journey, and probably much more than what I would be able to do, because in a couple of days I will be busy for the first closing of our impact fund in Italy. So you have really to bear with me, because I wouldn't be really able to make many slides. But I want first to tell you a little bit of context about what we have done so far. As Gianluca mentioned, we set up OPES. This is, well, before OPES Italia, if you don't mind, Gianluca, I do a step back. And so what OPES LCF Impact Fund is, and when we set up our vehicle, our investment vehicle, we did in 2012 in Italy, when in our country there was only one very well-known established player, and impact investing was perceived very much as not as something like exotic. This is what I remember I was many times told by investors or colleagues. So in 2012, I decided together with other social-minded people to set up an investment vehicle to prove that impact investing, to prove in our country that impact investing could be regarded as an appealing asset class for investments. And we decided at that time that we wanted to invest very fast, and so we decided not to set up a regulated vehicle, but we set up a foundation. So OPES LCF Impact Fund is a non-profit investment vehicle, investing in many regions in early stage enterprises. Over the years, we made 21 investments, and we have currently a portfolio of 17 investments, mainly in East Africa, but also other regions and Italy. A couple of years ago, we decided then to set up a new vehicle, and this is what OPES Italia is. And so my presentation will be very much between the two vehicles, and because we believe in cross-reverse linkage knowledge, and the reason why we set up OPES Italia is because of what we learned investing very much overseas and mainly in emerging markets. So OPES Italia is a regulated investment vehicle regulated by Bank of Italy, and we are now rushing for the first closing that will happen on Friday. And the objective of OPES Italia is supporting with very tailored financing early stage impact enterprises with market traction and proven business model. So Gianluca, if you can show please the next page, next one. This is really very much our positioning, and I just would like to stress what in our view is the meaning of the impact fund. We we do believe that a fund that is positioning itself in the impact space, impact investing space, should not just show the intentionality of generating a social and environmental impact, but also create an additionality. And so looking for solution, basically. And this is why we had in the past, and we will do with this new fund, invest in a solution, in a market-based solution that tackle problems that we believe are very serious problems, not just in Italy, across I think across many other countries. But we pick up some problem we are very much concerned, and of course this positioning has been done before the COVID storm. A pandemic really disrupted our life, and we believe that what we identified as critical problems are right now even greater and more serious. So we wanted to invest in companies that create decent work for young people, that can provide a solution for migrant marginalization and migrants, and empower migrants' talent. We wanting to invest in companies that tackle the problem of gender disparities and inequalities, and region disparities. Is not just south and north, but very much rural and urban, or peripheries and the centers. We believe that impact investing is very much polarized, not just in our country, globally, and we want really to contribute in reducing this polarization. We are sector agnostic, and we believe that the impact should be, and the impact core assets in the companies should be very much embedded in their business model. And this is why we do believe that the impact should come alongside the return. Of course, even if we do believe that looking at the company, market-based solution that tackle critical problems require patience and a flexibility and tolerance in accepting lower returns than the returns that are very much different from the private equity industry. I want just to stress something that is, we think that is very much a core asset in our proposition. And here you see what we believe has been really very instrumental for us in setting up this new fund. That is obviously the track record we have created and built individually and collectively as a team. So for anyone who is engaged in setting up or is thinking and exploring the opportunity to set up a fund, should keep in mind that one of the key issues and one of the key requirements is having key people, a team that can really support the effort, because the investment journey is definitely a huge titanic effort for everyone. So first you should have a team whose skills and talents and diversity of talents can really complement each other. The second point of value proposition, or call it a strategy, is the impact framework. Every fund, in our view, should have, and an impact framework that should be proven somehow. In our case, we have developed our impact framework in the last 8 years of investing. Of course, with some slightly difference, because, as I say, we have invested in many different geographies and not just Italy. And then you have to look, and this is what we believe very much in our case, you have to look for some additional core assets or additional contribution in making your proposition sort of unique. And we have been a very strong advocate of a gender lens investing. We do believe that the gender lens investing is not just an impact tool in terms of tackling gender inequalities, but it can, sorry for the disruption, but it can be a very effective risk mitigation tool. We have seen and proven in our past portfolio that to invest in companies that are gender balanced, and not just gender balance, but I would say diversity balance, and diversity also in terms of the cognitive diversity. So in a very wide spectrum of diversity is definitely more rewarding than to have a portfolio of diversity and balance companies. And finally, there is you need to make very sure, and this is what we have done with this new impact fund, about your investment strategy. And this is what I think is in the slides. I will try to explain in the following slides. So here you can see just a nutshell of our impact framework. And as I mentioned, there are some categories of the impact we want to create and generate by investing in our companies. And if you look at just the first one, the quality employment created, we are not just looking at the number of employees or the number of in terms of job creation, but we also look at really the quality of the work. In Italy, for instance, we have a very high percentage of working poor. Probably is at least before COVID, we had the highest number and percentage of the working poor across Europe. It means people who have jobs and who are not paid in a decent way. So for us, it should be very much clear when we invest in company that this is one of the objectives and one of the expectations we have with our companies. And for just to pick another one is, as I say, gender lens. It doesn't mean that we invest in company. We invest in companies that are already very balanced in terms of gender diversity, but we wanted to build with our company a sustainable roadmap in terms of the impact and in terms of objectives, so that together we can accomplish that and pursue. So this is really very briefly in terms of the impact framework, but in terms of also other elements of a strategy, what I didn't mention is that the impact fund we are launching in Italy will focus just in Italy. So we have a very precise geography. The type of companies is early stage, as I mentioned, with a sort of market traction. The type of financing we will deploy is well, it is a very tailored financing from common equity to convertible loans and preferential share. In terms of the sector, as I say, we are very agnostic, but because we look at just at the impact and the potential impact the companies can generate. So this is a very much in terms of a strategy. Here, just I share with you one example of the impact matrix we have designed while investing in a company in Italy, which objective was very much migrant integration. And so what we really aim is to look for some impact metrics that are easy to measure, that don't create an additional burden to our companies, and are very much related to the business they are running. We know, and this is what we have been through, gone through in these 8 years, that impact measurement and impact management is still in a very foggy space, and it is very much true for us. So we have definitely to improve and to work on this space. And I also hope to learn from very much from George, and we are partnering together in one investment, hopefully in many others to come. But we are not a strong, we are a strong believer that impact should be measured. We are equally strong believer that impact measurement shouldn't drag our companies too much in the process, but keep them very focused on the goals. So we wanted to find metrics that are easy, that can support our companies in running their business. So here, I think I can really stop here, and maybe hear from you.
Thank you very much, Elena. Once again, as you mentioned, these are very busy days for you, so we are very thankful you managed to be here with us. I will then start asking a couple of questions that we received from the audience. So the first one is for George, and looking at let's say the sizes of your investment. So you told us what were the expected sizes of investment, but from the audience we received the questions on whether you met your expectations for your first 6 investments, and yeah, if you can share also if that was difficult or not to find sizes of the deal of that sizes.
Sure, thank you so much for the question. And the answer in short is yes. We have 2 investments in the range of 200,000 euros. Those are obviously from a smaller and much more risk intensive fund. And we have other investments that range up to 1.5 million. So actually both the bottom of the spectrum and the top of the spectrum are widely sought. there's just one thing, that if we move to the west and outside of the region, we find that the risk profile kind of increases very much with the size of the tickets. So we're looking at 1.5 million seed stage investments, which are kind of steep for us who are more accustomed to the Eastern European ticket sizes.
Thank you very much, George. I would like now to address a question to Elena. So why was Opus Italia set up as a EVPA fund and not as a USEF fund?
Thanks for the question. Well, we struggled to convince our anchor investor, but also our regulatory body, Bank of Italy, that EUSEF could be a viable alternative to EVPA. So the challenge is that EUSEF is not a very well-known, let's say, space. It's not a very well-known type of fund. It's at least in Italy, this social enterprise, EUSEF should concentrate and invest just in social enterprises. And the social enterprises, as they are defined according to our legal framework, are companies that have some cap in dividend distribution, have some restriction requirements in terms of industrial sectors. So there are some restrictions linked to the EUSEF type of funding and label. And so it was for us really a very challenging journey dealing with our regulatory body, I mean, Bank of Italy and Consob, and make them understand that impact fund can invest in sustainable companies. And they were not aware at all of the EUSEF label. And so it was at the time when we started this, the application with our governing body was too much already in terms of efforts and in terms of tiredness to make also a point about EUSEF. So I would say, unfortunately, it was a very opportunistic reason. So it's not a matter of philosophical positioning, but it was very instrumental given the stage of maturity of impact investing in Italy, unfortunately. I don't know whether I answer, but there is no, unfortunately, different answer in my view.
Thank you very much, Elena. And as I'm aware of time, thank you for posting the questions. We will follow up with the speakers after the webinar, but we now have to move to the next section of the webinar. So I will leave the floor again to my colleague Arnau, who will briefly introduce the investment process, and then we will leave the floor to our speakers again.
Thank you again, Gianluca, and thank you all for your first part. I think it's been very interesting, and also for the Q&A. And yes, let's move towards the investment process, which is the second half of this webinar. So this is again the four parts in which we divided the investment process. So Investors for Impact start by screening organizations, and then they, after a preliminary assessment, they conduct the due diligence, and then they structure the deal with the potential investees, And finally, they go through the investment management. And here in investment management, it's important that we consider it both at the investee level, so managing each social purpose organization, but also at the portfolio level. The objective broadly of the investment process is to maximize the achievement of social impact of the investees. And after the investment process, there is the execution of exit, which again we will not dive in depth today, and it's in the part 4 of the toolkit. But it is important that after the investment process, Investors for Impact leave behind SPOs with a stronger business model and organizational structure, as well as more ability to attract and manage resources. Let's see how this relates to the venture philanthropy practices. So as Gianluca mentioned before, the first steps of these frameworks are assessed during the investment strategy. So here is basically the rest of them. So concerning tailored financial support, during the deal screening and the due diligence, Investors for Impact assess the financial needs of the SPO, and during the deal structuring, we have the matching between the Investors for Impact goals and the SPO's needs. For non-financial support, the assessment of the needs of the SPO, it's again during the deal screening and the due diligence, and then the step 3, which is the NFS plan, happens during the deal structuring, and during the investment management, of course, non-financial support is delivered, and then assessing the value will happen after exit. And for impact measurement and management, although Investors for Impact talk about or assess their own objectives during the investment strategy, then we will have the whole process happening during the investment management phase, and during the previous phases, they should already go through it and tackle the different parts of the framework. Then if we look at the exit, the step 1, which is determining key exit consideration, was also assessed during the investment strategy. Also, it should be considered during the deal screening. And then the second step, which is developing the exit plan, can be assessed during the due diligence and the deal structuring. And the step 3, which is determining the exit readiness, will happen during the investment management. After the investment process, so during exit, we will have the execution of the exit and the post-investment follow-up. So without further ado, and keeping this brief, we can start with you now, Elena. So if you could tell us more about how you manage your investment process and how you integrated the venture philanthropy practices into
Actually, sorry Arnaud to interrupt, but I think we'll have to start with George, as Elena had to jump out of the call for some moments. So we will start from George and then go back to Elena if she manages to come back.
Okay, great, thank you. So George, I translate you the same question. Tell us more about how you manage your investment process and how you integrate the venture philanthropy practices into its part.
Sure, thank you. This is a huge and very wide topic, and the way I would like to address it is more the lessons learned and the takeaways we have found so far. So if we move to the first slide I've prepared here, we obviously have a huge amount of impact-related and venture philanthropy-related tasks to attend to and focus on in each step along the investment process. What I find very important and want to highlight is in the deal sourcing and due diligence phase, actually the education of founder comes up very heavily. It's an ideal world where the social entrepreneur really knows its stuff and really knows how a theory of change is working, how to approach and build an evidence-based impact thesis, and we find that they really need our guidance and support. And here we have a huge amount of focus, because the quality and the let's say the quality set out at the beginning and the way of cooperation we kind of develop at the start of an investment really sets out how it will all work along in portfolio management. So we try to get the founders extremely well involved, guide them in understanding and navigating in so many tools and approaches. And that's why we developed some of our own materials, which are very straightforward and help the founders to get to a conclusion. In this founder education process, we find that we ourselves are very much educated in the process, and that is because the founders themselves are experts in their field and experts in their knowledge of their stakeholders, of their beneficiaries. And it's amazing to learn in the due diligence phase about what kind of stakeholders are engaged, what are their actual needs, how are they involved, and how they can be best addressed. And we find this part the most valuable, not just from our perspective, from understanding the impact generation, but also for the future of the target companies. Because usually here is where we kind of unearth opportunities that haven't been thought of before, and that we can integrate into the business plan as a new business line, integrate into our impact value chain as an extra KPI, and just another focus on how to deliver impact. So that is a very important part. In the deal structuring, I love to highlight that beyond having annual targets and quarterly targets, we try to make an easily accomplishable 100-day plan, so that the low-hanging fruits can be accomplished in terms of improving internal processes and engagement with stakeholders. And that really brings the vibe and motivation to the team, as they feel super motivated once they achieve tangible results in the first 100-day. Also related to this is throughout the investment management is the improvement planning. So what we kind of dig from the due diligence, all the stakeholder analysis really outlines what kind of potential KPIs and potential areas of impact we can introduce in the future. And what we see is that we have some of these areas on hold until we have the capacity and resources to deal with them. But in the investment management process, what I see most important is to find time and allocate focus on kind of unlocking these areas and improve the impact delivery as much as we can. So that's what I find as a huge opportunity. And in terms of exit, we haven't been there yet in our impact fund. But what I find important is of course the mission protection, kind of to embed the impact itself so heavily that whatever acquisition or exit comes, there's no chance of mission drift there. I cannot overestimate again the importance of the stakeholder and beneficiary engagement. That's one of the biggest lessons learned. And the other thing is that we keep reminding ourselves that impact measurement really has to be proportionate to the size and the resources of the target company. Because when as an impact manager or an investment manager, you see huge opportunities which would be lovely to pursue, but at the beginning, especially in an early stage company, you might not have the resources, or it might not be reasonable to allocate so much attention to one specific area, because the business has to grow, the business has to stay sustainable. And I find myself being impatient, but I have to stay patient in addressing those very interesting topics and areas, and wait until we have the financial power, we have the organizational resilience to really really address those issues. Yeah, so that's about the investment process. And if we move along, I quickly gathered two examples of how we deliver non-financial support and tailored financing. One is for We Love What You Build. That's a company, a Lego logistics company, which is employing autistic people who would otherwise not have a job. So high functioning, but otherwise quite unemployable, very smart autistic individuals. And what the founder said to me is that, George, I have a very cool algorithm that kind of calculates supply and demand in the secondary legal market. And what we need is to optimize our stock. And what happened is that we structured the deal as mainly mezzanine for them to being able to stock up, and that really improved sales numbers. So that's a good situation, which the business was needing a specific type of financing, and we could deliver that in a twofold structure. In terms of the non-financial support, what the most important part was probably that we managed to hire as a head of autism-specific workplace and as a coach, the president of Autism Europe, and she's been instrumental in building up the processes and coaching each and every autistic employee in the company, and that's been a huge help. And we were very happy that we had that kind of network. And in terms of Green Fox Academy, they are doing reskilling. So career changers, those who are burnt out or lost their jobs, they find themselves looking for future-proof jobs in IT, and Green Fox is helping them gain those skills and help them to a job in the IT industry. In this case, of course, this can be an expensive teaching product, and many of the students cannot afford it once they kind of lose their job. So Green Fox Academy was the first one who introduced income sharing plans in the region, and allowed students to enroll in their trainings free and in a post-payment structure. And what we did is provided a big chunk of mezzanine finance that enabled them to bring on board hundreds of students in a post-payment structure. So that was very neat at the end of the day, and we could really directly see the impact of our investment. And in the non-financial support, we're actually heavily working on packaging this solution, this investment we've made, into a bankable product, so that the company is not only dependable on us, but maybe they can invite banks to provide a loan in a structured way to allow for pre-financing students. So like a student loan product. Yeah, there's many more, but maybe these are two examples that I could bring to you. And for non-financial support, I have to highlight that in many cases, I find that legal and the impact measurement support is the most helpful. And in 90% of the time, the companies, they really use these opportunities. Our network is, of course, limited, but what we can definitely deliver in each and every case is support in these two areas. And of course, try to find co-investors who have the knowledge, network, special knowledge in the area and field that the social enterprise is lacking. And I think that is one under appreciated area of non-financial support, but of course, very obvious to find the right kind of co-investors. In terms of impact management and impact measurement, an example, this is actually the example of a company, an investment we made together with Elena and Opus Fund. This is an Italian training company that is helping working parents and caregivers to transform the experience they gain from these caregiving into business skills. And so it's a soft skill development, it's a solution. It really reduces stress, it improves employee engagement and company climate. A very cool little training solution. And what we did here, we mapped out the theory of change and kind of boiled it down to a very simple impact value chain that you see on the slides. And what we do is drive through the input and activities to find on a 3-level basis how the impact is delivered. More tangible on the output side, but we deliberately look at outcome, which is kind of more the consequential side of the whole impact generation. And finally, kind of highlight a mission, a long-term impact objective. Yes, so that's how we kind of map out what we're looking at. And what you also see on this slide is that in many cases we find it very helpful and resourceful for finding research partnerships, because in many cases you only have just as many internal resources to verify what you're doing is correct. And what LiveFeed was doing is building partnerships with universities and are founding research projects where they can effectively measure how their solution improves employability, improves social skills, improves stress management. And it's amazing to see on a way larger sample on academic research how their product is actually benefiting the target group. Also, it's not just for verification, but for development of new impact areas. And in this instance, we're working with Kellogg and also University of Milano. We are developing new tools that kind of improve not just the user experience, but also brings additional value to the clients. So it really improves the product itself from a business perspective. And that's where we see that impact and business comes hand in hand. And we are able to bring solutions to the table that we can actually sell to the clients with added value, improve the bottom line, and also improve the user experience and user impact generation. Yeah, and I have one final slide to become very technical and just showcase how we approach. I mentioned the 3 KPIs in the slide above, and what we do in every SPO, every portfolio company, is that give a relative weight to each KPI, share what the historic performance is for each of these KPIs, and then map out, instead of a baseline, map out the goals, the target objectives of each of these KPIs. And these target values range from 1 to 2 years to 3 to 5, depending on how easy or how manageable it is to map out the performance. And what we do is just relatively map against these outcomes. So our current reported would be X, our intermediate indicative target would be Y, and we're looking at X divided by Y, and we come to a relative weighted performance indicator. So in one single number, in one single relative performance measure, we can express how the company is going according to plans. That is our overall impact multiple. I know it's oversimplifying. This is more a tool to deliver to our limited partners as they ask, but this really helps us to stay on track. Of course, we look very much in depth how these impacts are being generated, what the risks are associated, and in our more wider impact reporting, we report the exact outcomes and not these multiples. But these multiples really help us to stay on point and focus. And it also allows us to be able to look at impact on a portfolio level. If we weigh in the ticket size, so the investment size, we can, by simple multiplication, arrive to one single total portfolio impact multiple. And that is helpful at the end of the day. It keeps us cautious whether our target setting is okay, and it shows relative performance at the end of the day. What I have to highlight here is that we we very heavily revise this every year so that we have accurate plans and ambitious targets. And I think it really helps the founders and the social enterprises as well to see that these are very hard figures, and these are goals that they have to work heavily for, and that these are taken very seriously. So I think that's a wrap up for how we approach impact measurement. I missed the impact risk assessment more in depth, but maybe in another webinar. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, George. It was super interesting. So thank you very much. And yeah, I have a couple of questions of the audience. Unfortunately, we don't have much time, but we can start with one question that was actually asked during the first part. If you could tell us what are the target returns on the fund level?
Financial or impact? Well, let's say we're looking at financial. We're a little bit below market rate. So what our limited partners, our investors, are expecting is between 4 and 7% IRR, and that boils down to the portfolio companies a little higher, since there's a lot of companies who don't survive along the way. And in terms of impact return, we have to achieve the goals we set out. So if we achieve an overall impact multiple that is below 1, that heavily affects the carried interest of the fund manager. And that means that each and every euro we would receive from the success of the fund, we would have to send those carry to a social enterprise or multiple social organizations to offset our disability to deliver the suitable impact. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly answered, so thank you. And here at the end, you mentioned about the impact risk assessment, and we actually had a question on this. So if you could very briefly elaborate a bit more and give a bit recommendation on the impact risk assessment.
Sure. I would first highly recommend the work of Bridges Impact and their impact radar, and also the impact measurement project, because there's a lot of impact risk related research and best practice going on there. What we're aiming to do at the moment is kind of collect all the risk points that we've been faced in our investment experience so far, and address them with suitable criteria. What I'm looking at here, for example, in many cases, the impact thesis, the impact itself is not well evidenced. It's an idea. It's just an idea at the moment. And what we're looking for is to find best practice, well evidenced solutions. And if we are able to find academic research, first-hand research, second-hand research in this area, that really improves our ability to make sure that the certain intervention that is done is going to work, is well evidenced. That is just one. Elena mentioned additionality, and we have to be very self-aware how much additionality we bring to the table. Would the company actually be receiving funds without our support, or are we actually participating as a catalyst and introducing VC kind of investment money in a social sector company, so to attract other investors, or are we just one in the line with multiple VCs, competing for one single transaction? And yeah, these are just two examples, but there's hundreds of other aspects we're trying to look into, find criteria, and kind of give a score, because the impact profile of one and another company can differ very, very much. And it makes sense for us to be able to understand how much money we're allocating to what level of impact at what level of risk. And there's some level of risk mitigation happening in the impact management phase. So when doing portfolio management, we look back into this risk assessment and kind of find what areas are to be developed, what do we have to further evidence, what kind of areas that we should provide added value so that the impact generation can be maximized.
Thank you again, George. Let's close with the last question. How do you calculate the value of the investment in the social company? Is this the amount versus the percentage of equity based on impact targets? And how do you set those targets? I think you already or partially tackled this in the last slide, but if you could, develop a bit more on this.
Yes, I hope I managed to answer a big chunk of that question, but there's a valid point here that if we look at how much new employment opportunities we are able to create with an investment, and if we divide the size of the investment with the number of these opportunities, we come to some kind of measure. And I'm not saying it's equal and it's easy to compare, but what we're trying to do is remain in certain borders and barriers and not overspend on delivery of impact. So what the IRIS and many other networks help us is to prevent overspending on one unit of impact generation. And what we're doing is trying to stay conscious and find the opportunities where our money brings the most value to the table. Yep.
Thank you again, George. It's been very nice presentation, and also thank you for answering these questions. Unfortunately, we have no more time for more questions, but we can follow up with those that have not been answered later with the speakers. So thanks again, and I'm leaving the floor to Gianluca to wrap up and close the webinar.
Thank you very much, Arnau and George, for answering all these questions and providing your experience. We are sorry that Elena had to leave, but I think she also added a lot already in the first part of the webinar. So very briefly before concluding, I wanted to tell you that the Investing for Impact Toolkit is now available, and you can download it for free on our website. Here is the link, and we will circulate also the slides in the coming days. If you don't have, if you haven't done it yet, and you value the charter and principles and the 10 principles of the charter, I strongly suggest you to sign it. You can see the link on this slide. For any further question, don't hesitate to contact me and Arnau. Here are our contacts. And I will conclude by thanking our sponsors that are Fondazione CRT and the European Commission. So thank you very much for participating, and see you next time.